this is Remix Citizen here. In today's video, here's why and how I'm using ChatGPT with Craft. Let's get started. First thing I want to cover is the list of Craft Assistant limitations because those are the reasons why I'm trying to use an external tool like ChatGPT to support my AI needs. The first thing that you'll notice when you're using the Craft Assistant for any AI-related work, if I ask it to write me a poem, the answer is within this window here, and at the end of the answer, I don't get a follow-up question. Sometimes some things that I like to do sometimes, so I can just insert the answer that I've got here. Next, if I want to do something else with the context of the previous conversation that I had, I'll invoke again the assistant, but I don't have anything back to this. I don't have, and the request itself lost context of the conversation. So for me, it's a problem. The other thing is that the list of supported models is rather limited. There's a lot of on-device models that you can download and execute if your computer's resources allow it. You can use the Apple Foundation model, the local one, not the cloud-based one. And the other two models from ChatGPT are the 4.0 mini and the 4.0, which are quite dated as I'm recording this, since GPT-5 has been available for quite a while. So there's always this gap between the available resources or models from the AI providers like OpenAI and what we can actually do in ChatGPT. So that's the other reasons why I don't rely too much on the assistant for any generative based work within Craft. But having the assistant access to AI within the application itself is very handy, but all that is kind of broken down because of the other limitations. The other thing is, since I'm not using my personal ChatGPT account, the Craft interaction won't update my ChatGPT memory. And for me, it's very important because as I'm using the service, it's building some knowledge about me, what I like to do, the type of prompt that I'm asking, and the type of answers that I want to have each time I'm interacting with the service. So I'm not really using the ChatGPT memory by using the Craft Assistant, and there is no way also to use an API from my ChatGPT account through the Craft Assistant. So it's rather limiting, but maybe for some people that's just fine. But I really like to have an external tool like ChatGPT to complement and support my workflow. And this is what I'm going to show you next. The workflow that I'm going to show you has been tested in fact, for many articles, so that I would have a workflow that really fits my needs. And my needs are very simple. It's the requirement for when I'm reading an article on the web, I like to summarize it in a very specific way, and also to have a chance to analyze it. Depending on the articles that I'm reading, I want to kind of analyze it further depending of the summarization that I get. So what you're seeing right now is a list of articles that I've been summarizing and analyzing with this workflow using ChatGPT. I'll give you an example of a specific article on Apple Liquid Glass. It's a rather long article, and this article has been saved using the Craft Web Clipper into this specific folder called Articles, Summary, and Analysis. This article talks about the reasons and the motivations of liquid glass. And I wanted to have a summarization using this workflow. And the structure of the article inside Craft is always the same, where the Craft web clipper will save this first part here, where there's the link to the original article, there's the author and the site where it comes from. Those are not linked. Actually, they're only text, but the original article is right there. There is a few tags that I'm entering when I'm using the web clipper. There's a place where you can set a few tags if you want, and this is what I'm doing. And then there's the date of when the article has been saved. And then this portion here is complemented with related articles on the same subject. If I see that there is some articles that I have already analyzed in my Craft environment. And then those two blocks here, this is here the analysis itself and a link to the chat that I add with ChatGPT, because you can share the link to the chat itself. And so for historical reason, if I want to go back later, like 6 months later, I want to go back to this analysis and I want to ask more question, then I can do that within the ChatGPT interface. So I'm going to show you how the summary looks, the specific portions, and how what type of prompt I'm using in ChatGPT to generate this summary. Now let's review how the summary looks and what is the structure of this summarization. So I'm going to click on this page here, which is a subpage within my Craft document. And the prompt is, I would like you to summarize the article in 3 steps. First, write a brief summary paragraph, then a structured summary, and finally list the central ideas or takeaways, concluding with a selection of possible quotes. I always keep the original copy of the prompt with the actual summarizations for contextual information. And you can see here the actual structure, where if I use the table of content here, I can see the actual structure of the summarization. So I have a brief summary in the first part, and then most of the time, ChatGPT will create a structured summary in the form of a table with what has been discussed, key observations for all the themes covered by the article. So it's very useful. And then there's this summarization where what are the central ideas or key takeaways from this article. And then next up is the selected quotes, where ChatGPT will try to find meaningful quotes out of this article. And this portion is very interesting because sometimes I will take a specific quote in this section to write a link post on my blog, for example. And for that, I'll be highlighting the actual quote that I want to keep. And then I can click on this document here, where I can see all the quotes that I'm keeping for future use. And then at the end of summarization, I ask another question, compare this guy's review or article with other reviewers. And then that's the follow-up question that I cannot ask in the Craft itself, in the Craft Assistant. So that's why I'm using ChatGPT, as I said earlier. And then there's this follow-up answer from ChatGPT where it adds some more content to the analysis of this article. So that's the structure of the summarization. It's basically the same from one article to the other, but sometimes there will be some variation, and depending on the result, I'll ask a follow-up question or prompt to kind of add more content to the summarization and analysis. I recently said that I started using Craft Daily Notes because until very recently, I could not find a useful use case for using Craft Daily Notes. One of the use case is when I'm using the summarization of articles that I'm reading, the Craft web clipper will always create a badge for the date when I save the article to my Craft environment. And then if I click on the badge itself, then I have a daily note where what I did on this specific date. You can see that on October 13, I did read a lot of articles to test my workflow. And so I can see all the articles that I read and use my ChatGPT combination with Craft to test the workflow itself. And then if you go to the bottom of the daily notes itself, I can see that all the references where I did something on that specific date, like I did probably update my subscription content, work on this article, and then also improve some other thing regarding the improving focus and concentration. And so that's very useful. So that's the use of the Craft Daily Note. As I said earlier, I save a copy of the link to the conversation in ChatGPT if I want to go back to that. If I click on that, it will open this window here, and then if I click on the continue conversation, it will open that on the web. And as you can see, that's the original prompt with the link here of the article, and that's the actual summary that I simply copy and pasted into my Craft document. So you can see here the actual summarization and analysis. If I want, I can simply add a follow-up question, something that I did earlier in the conversation here, where I asked to compare the original author with other reviewers of Apple Liquid Glass. And I could, again, continue to ask another question if I want, like, I don't know, I say, what are the other names? I don't even know if there is others, and then ChatGPT will continue in the context of this conversation and will tell me that there is no others in this article or reference by the other reviewers, something that I find strange, for example, but that's another thing. So that's the use of the link to the original conversation with ChatGPT that I find useful if I want to go back to that later. Now I want to show you two examples of article analysis and summarization using ChatGPT. The first article on the left is about a review of the Apple Watch Series 11. And the second one is about a guy who tried to make a website using iWeb. And it's a very interesting article, by the way. So I'll first analyze and summarize this article. The first step is to use the Craft web clipper to save this article in Craft. And I'm going to use a few tags here. So since it's a review, I'll select the review tag. I could also see if there is any Apple Watch. There is no Apple Watch tag. I'm going to use maybe tech review if I have a tech review here. So I'll use those two tags, for example, for this for the purpose of this demonstration. I'm going to use the article summary and analysis folders where I'm going to save this article. So it's going to be saved there. I'll come back to that later. Now I'm simply using the bookmark of this article, and I'll switch to ChatGPT where I have the same prompt that I showed you earlier in the video, followed by the actual link to the article. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to work on that. It's very fast usually. And as you can see, there's again this brief summary, a rather more detailed, structured summary of the article, the central ideas, takeaways, and a few quotes. And as you can see, for some reason, depending on the content of the article, the structured summary might be different. What I'm going to do now is I'll go back to Craft and look for the article that has been saved by the web clipper. I'll double click on that. And as you can see, this is the article and all the images has been saved. Everything is fine. What I'm going to do now is to create a new document here in this folder where I'm going to save the summary and analysis from the ChatGPT. I'll go back to here. I'll simply copy the response that I've got from ChatGPT, go back to craft and then paste that into the craft document. So that's the summarization for the actual article. Next, what I'm going to do is to go back to the article, and then I'm going to take this summary here and create a subpage for that, for the actual summarization. I'll use the block because I want to keep that in a very specific header at the beginning. And then what I can do is to use the shared link to the conversation and then paste it later in the right there at the end of this section so that I can keep this conversation for later use if I want to. So that's the first summarization. Now I'm going to do the second article. Now let's do the summarization and analysis of the second article, which by the way is very nice because this guy was able to recreate a website with iWeb, which is a rather old application that was made by Apple article. So I'm going to again do the summarization with ChatGPT. I have exactly the same prompt and the link to the actual website. So I'm going to ask for a summarization of that. So as you can see here, if you look carefully, the beginning of the summarization, since the article you directed to from Spacebar News appears to be inaccessible due to a robot's takedown restriction, I wasn't able to read the full article. Based on the Interact references, forums, aggregator posts, I've pieced together a plausible summary. That's very interesting. There's a people who don't like the idea of having OpenAI or other generative AI providers to go on their website, do some summarization, and I don't the that's not the goal of this video to discuss or to challenge this idea, but there's a workaround. But before doing the workaround, there's a brief summary which use discussion where I can see the places where the ChatGPT work found some references to, for example, iWeb here. There are maybe other references later, possible quotes from this website. Again, from this website. I'm not sure that this is the best summarization that I could get. I tried that later before recording the video itself. And I do remember that the summarization was also using a link, a forum in Reddit where people were kind of link posted to the original article and added some comments. And I think the summary was better because of that, but it's not the best way to do it. The workaround for that is to use the Dia browser from the makers of the browser company. Again, the same prompt and the link to the article to summarize, and then I simply ask the summarization. And for some reason, maybe the robots.txt file doesn't block this AI, but I can have a structured summarization with the same structure, the same section. So I can now copy that and save this article. I could save the article using the craft web clipper from this page here, and then create another document for the actual summarization, and then drag this document inside the original content to make it a page like I did for the first article. So that's one workaround to maybe be able to do the actual summarization. Even though I was not able to use ChatGPT to do the summarization, by using the Dia browser, I can achieve very similar results. You can see here the actual article saved with the craft web clipper with all the illustration, the content, and everything is there. And then if I go into this summarization, you pretty much see that the actual structure and content is pretty much the same as the ChatGPT version. I did not do very detailed comparison between the actual answers that I get when using the DIA browser instead of ChatGPT. But for the purpose of the summarization, I think it's more than good enough for this purpose. The thing that I'm missing though is a link to a shared conversation with this content generated by the DIA browser. What I could do here is invoke the craft assistant and maybe ask a follow-up question to further analyze this article or this summary. I could ask something like, what are the web technologies mentioned? And then we'll see how the craft assistant will fare into that. I make sure that I'm using the GPT 4.0 model and then ask the question. You'll see that the answer is pretty nice and something that I could get also using ChatGPT, but I think it's, again, more than good enough. Just copy that and I could just enter a separator here, a light one, and then paste the actual answer from the craft assistant. So not all is lost with the craft assistant. If you know the actual very focused use case for craft assistant, then it's good, but most of the time I'll be using an external tool like ChatGPT to do the actual work. So that's what I wanted to show you with this the second article summarization. There's another way to do the process that I've showed you on this video is by using Apple Shortcut. I'm going to demonstrate that using this article from Mac Stories where they review the latest M5 iPad Pro. And this whole summarization and analysis workflow that I'm showing you in this video is very well suited for this type of articles where I have a lot of contents, a lot of detailed explanations, references, and stuff like that. So this is exactly the type of article that I like to use this workflow with. So the first thing I'm going to do is to save this article in my craft environment. Again, I'll select a few tags to this to save this article. Tech review. There's another one here. I know that I have maybe iPad tag. I may have iPad Pro. Using tags helps later retrieval of this information. So that's the three tags I'm going to use. I'm going to save that in the same destination, and the craft web clipper will do its magic. What I'm going to do is to make sure that I have a copy to this article, and then I'll switch to shortcuts and then execute that. So that's the URL of the actual article. I'm hoping that Mac Stories doesn't block OpenAI or ChatGPT from scanning and the content of the article. So I click done on that. And then you will see that the shortcut is doing its work. There's a step where I lost my cursor for some reason, but you can see that I'll go back to the shortcut where I asked ChatGPT. This is only possible in macOS Tahoe because now we can ask question directly to ChatGPT right from a shortcut. So you can see here that's the exact same prompt that I've been using since the beginning of this video. And then I'll use the actual URLs variable at the end of the prompt so that ChatGPT get the full prompt. And then the answer will be to create a document called summary and analysis in the team itself and the same folder with the actual answer to this prompt. So that's what we've got here. We've got the document here that I'll move inside the actual article. There's one thing that is missing, though I could maybe change the shortcut, is to include a copy of the original prompt like I do for all the other summary when I'm doing that manually. So you have the actual brief summary, the structured summary, and then central ideas and takeaways, a few selected quotes, and then there's the actual follow-up question that ChatGPT suggested at the end of the answer. Obviously, by using this process, I don't have the history right from the shortcut app, but I have to go back to ChatGPT and then paste that follow-up question or continue with the actual conversation within my ChatGPT account. Come here, select the article, and then I'll move this document right here to make it inside the actual document and use the same format for this article. I'm going to share a link to the rule of conduct when I'm using AI in general. What I want to tell you is that usually I read the article after reading the summary because I want to make sure that the actual summary is reproducing the main ideas of the actual content or the source article, and because generative AI can do some very bad errors in their response. And so that's part of my rule of conduct when I'm using generative AI in general or AI in general in my workflows. That's the other way of using the summarization with ChatGPT, but from a shortcut. To summarize the process, it's very simple. There's a kind of 4 steps. The first one is to find and read the article. As I said earlier, I'm using a lot of RSS feeds for my reading workflow. I'm using iKnow Reader for that. And then the second step is to save the article using the web clipper. And then the third step is to actually summarize the article using either the shortcut I showed you earlier, or use a ChatGPT by pasting the prompt and the link to the actual article. And then the result of the shortcut is a document itself that I'll move inside the content of the article, which is in a separate document, as I showed earlier in the video. And this completes the actual process. This concludes this video about using ChatGPT with Craft. But I want to tell you a few more things. The first thing is that I know that there are other tools that competes against OpenAI ChatGPT, like Gemini or Claude or others. I'm using ChatGPT simply because I like it, and I'm actually a subscriber. I'm paying for the subscription, for the Plus subscription, and that's why I'm using ChatGPT. Also, the second thing is that this workflow is not fixed. It will change over the course of the upcoming days or weeks. And the reason for that is very simple, because the generative AI environment or landscape is moving very fast, and there is new things pretty much every day. For example, I know that I've been testing actually a new browser from OpenAI, which is called a ChatGPT Atlas or Atlas browser. And I know that it's going to change the workflow that I presented in this video. Prompting will be the same, but the way I'm interacting with the application changes a bit. And the last thing is that Craft team is working on something very cool that it's coming in the next few weeks. And I know that, again, this will change the workflow for summarizing and analyzing articles, but I cannot talk about that now. I'm going to do another video in the future where I'll be talking about the ChatGPT browser, and eventually I'll talk about the upcoming update to Craft that will be very cool and that will obviously change a few things that I showed you today in this video. So I hope that you learned a few things. I hope that you found some ideas to help yourself in this world of content summarization and analysis. Thank you for watching until the very end. I hope that you like this video. If you're not subscribing to my YouTube channel, I think it's the time to do so that you don't miss any upcoming videos. So see you guys for another one very soon. Bye.